This happened a few weeks ago. I worked as a nurse on the night shift at a small, old hospital. I'd been there for nearly a decade, but dread filled me each time I walked through those flickering fluorescent lights. I took the night shift to help pay the bills after my husband lost his job. The hospital felt familiar, but things were changing. On my third night, I walked down a long corridor. The silence was thick. I noticed an empty stretcher outside a patient room. My gut twisted, but I shrugged it off. As I walked past, a chill crept down my spine, like icy breath on my neck. I brushed it off. Just my imagination, right? Around midnight, I heard strange sounds. They were faint cries echoing in the halls, like whispers of distant pain. I told myself I was just tired, but the next night was worse. I stayed at the nurse's station when a shadow caught my eye. A nurse walked past, her face unreadable. I smiled and said hello, but she looked through me as if I wasn't there. I didn't know who she was. I felt uneasy, but I pushed it down. On my fifth night, I entered a patient room to check on someone sleeping. The chart on the desk caught my eye. The writing was a mess. Lines were crossed out. Where was the nurse supposed to be? My heart raced. I felt like something needed my attention, like someone was trying to warn me. I left the room quickly. The air felt thicker. I approached the nurse's station, my thoughts racing. I couldn't shake the emptiness in the hallway, the odd sightings, or the odd charts. It seemed like the hospital was hiding something. I told myself it was just the stress of the job. But then the cries returned, clearer this time. They echoed louder, vibrating through the walls. I froze, my heart pounding. I moved deeper into the hallway, searching for the source. A figure flickered at the edge of my vision. I moved closer. My instinct screamed at me to run. Then I saw it clearly. A shadowy figure stood at the door of an empty room. My breath hitched. I called out, "Hello?" My voice bounced back, lost in the silence. Then I heard it again, a voice, soft but urgent. "Help me." My stomach churned. I stumbled backward, feeling dread pull in my chest. I turned to escape, but stopped short. The figure was behind me, closer than before. I blinked, but they didn't speak. I asked if they were okay, but they stood there, shrouded in darkness. And just like that, they disappeared. I gasped, alone again. My heart raced as I looked back to the empty room. The cries faded, but their presence lingered. What did I just see? Was it real? Or had the night shift finally driven me mad? I still wonder, who or what did I encounter that night? Next night was worse. I walked into the hospital, heart pounding. The shadows seemed deeper. The flickering lights felt like they laughed at me. I wondered what I would face tonight. Would the whispers return? As I settled in, I tried to shake the image of that figure from my mind. I busied myself with paperwork, but the cries haunted me. I recalled that voice, "Help me." It echoed in my ears, intertwining with the rustle of nurses and distant machines. I felt guilty. What if someone really needed me? Around midnight, I decided to check on patients. With each room I approached, the air grew heavier. The silence wrapped around me like a cold fog. I reached for the door of the room where I had heard the cries before, but stopped. An uneasy feeling gnawed at me. I turned to the nurse's station, scanning for someone to talk to. My colleague Clara sat typing furiously, her dark hair pulled tightly back. I hadn't seen her every night, but she felt like the last friendly face in this place. I cleared my throat. "Hey, Clara, do you know anything about room 203? She barely glanced up, but shook her head. "Nothing important. Why?" "I heard something. Maybe a patient?" I spoke softly, glancing back at the door. "You know how it is. Some nights are just slow," she mumbled, returning to her work. I wanted to press her for more, but didn't want to sound foolish. Instead, I walked away, my heart thumping louder. I felt drawn to room 203. What lay behind that door? As I approached, the same chill crept down my spine. I pushed the door open, and the room was dark, eerily quiet. The bed was empty. A chart lay on the table, covered in sharp, messy handwriting that looked familiar. My blood ran cold as I recognized it. My own handwriting, scribbled in haste during an earlier shift. I took a step back. Confusion swirled in me. Had I been here? There were no patients registered for 203. But the notes seemed to speak of fear, urgent messages that sent waves of panic through me. I turned to leave, but froze at the sound of a soft whisper behind me. "Help me." I whirled around, and there it was again. The shadowy figure emerged, floating, its face still hidden. My breath hitched as it pointed toward the bed. My legs trembled, caught between wanting to flee and my instinct to protect. Who were they? What had happened here? As I stepped closer, I felt the temperature drop, my breath visible in the air. Suddenly, the lights flickered violently, and then everything went dark. My heart raced in the pitch blackness. I fumbled for the door, panic setting in. That voice returned, louder now, a desperate plea. "Help me." Just then, I felt a cold hand grasp my wrist. I screamed, ripping free and stumbling backward. I've never run so fast in my life. I burst into the hallway, breathless, shaking. When I reached the nurse's station, Clara was gone. And in her place, someone else sat, a stranger who stared at me with wide, unblinking eyes. "Where is Clara?" I gasped. The stranger didn't respond. Instead, the lights flickered again, and I felt an overwhelming sense of dread wash over me. Someone or something was drawing closer. I stood frozen, the weight of the unknown pressing down hard. I needed answers. What was happening in this hospital? And more importantly, how could I escape it? I stood there, trembling, my mind racing. I had to find Clara. Maybe she would know what was happening. I turned back toward the hallway, but the darkness seemed to close in around me. I swallowed hard and forced myself to move. I needed a plan. I headed for the staff break room. Maybe my colleagues had gathered there. I pushed open the door, but the room was empty. A coffee pot sat cold on the counter, surrounded by stacks of old newspapers. I paced nervously, feeling the air thick with tension. That was when I noticed it. A piece of paper crumpled under a chair. I grabbed it, unfolding it with shaky hands. It was a note in Clara's handwriting. "If anything happens, don't trust what you see. Trust your instincts." There was no explanation, just that urgent warning. My heart sank. What had she meant? I knew I couldn't wait. I had to find her, or at least get some help. I slipped the note into my pocket and headed back out into the dark corridor. Each step echoed eerily, amplifying my fears. As I reached the elevators, I heard a soft sound, barely above a whisper. "Help me." My muscles tensed. It was the same voice from room 203. I was drawn to it, but reason fought against my instincts. I stood frozen, contemplating what to do. "Help me," it said again, more insistent this time. I edged closer to the source of the voice, emanating from room 204, just next door to where I had found Clara's unsettling note. Against my better judgment, I pushed the door open. Inside, the room was dimly lit. An old woman lay in the bed, her frail body shrouded beneath thin sheets. Her eyes, clouded but intense, locked onto mine. I could see the fear etched on her face. "Please," she rasped, "I need to get out of here." "What do you mean?" I asked, glancing around, half expecting the shadowy figure to emerge again. "They're coming for me," she hissed, her voice barely a whisper. "You must help before it's too late." My breath hitched. Who was coming for her? The shadows around her shifted, growing darker. I felt that same coldness seep back in, engulfing the room. I don't know how, I stammered. Trust your instincts, she whispered, as the lights began to flicker again. The room felt like it was closing in, walls inching closer as if alive. And, "Trust me," she hissed, panic rising in her voice. The nurses exchanged a sharp glance, and I felt the air grow heavier. This is a private matter. "No!" I shouted, adrenaline surging. "She's not well! I can't let you take her!" One of the nurses moved closer, eyes narrowing. "You don't understand what you're dealing with." "I understand enough!" I yelled, and that's when I noticed the other nurse's hand sliding beneath her scrubs. Time froze. My instincts screamed at me to run, to get the old woman out of there. But how? A loud crash erupted from the hallway, startling everyone. I took my chance, grabbing the old woman's arm. "We're leaving!" "What? No! You have to stay!" the nurse yelled, lunging toward us. I nearly stumbled as I yanked the old woman from the bed, feeling her frail body struggle against me. The hall was dimly lit, shadows shifting as I dragged her out. My pulse thundered in my ears. Something was wrong. The atmosphere had thickened with dread. "Where do we go?" the old woman gasped, her grip tightening around my arm. "They won't let you leave." Before I could respond, footsteps thundered behind us. I turned, breathing hard, fear tearing at my chest. It was now or never. "Come on!" I ran down the hallway, dragging her along, the echo of ominous whispers following us. Whatever was waiting beyond those doors, I knew we couldn't trust it. But as I ran forward, the question lingered in my mind. Who could I really trust? The dim light from the overheads flickered as we sprinted down the corridor. I could hear the nurses yelling behind us, their voices becoming frantic whispers, drowned out by my racing heart. Each step felt heavy, the old woman's frail frame weighed down by a tangible fear I could almost taste. "We have to find a way out," I urged, glancing at her. Her expression was a mixture of terror and defiance, eyes darting in every direction. "Do you have any idea where we're going?" I saw a door at the end of the hall," she stammered, her grip tightening painfully on my arm. The last thing I wanted was to slow down, but if she fell behind, I couldn't risk going back. The sound of hurried footsteps grew louder. Glancing over my shoulder, I saw one of the nurses rounding the corner, face obscured but urgency evident in their posture. Panic surged within me. "This way!" I shouted, yanking her toward a side corridor that branched off. As we turned the corner, I spotted a fire exit sign glowing faintly in the distance. The sound of our pursuers faded momentarily, but I knew they couldn't be far behind. "We have to be quick!" I dragged her along, and as we approached the door, I felt a mix of hope and dread. Would it be our escape, or just lead us into more chaos? I pushed the door, but it wouldn't budge. "What the—" grunted, slamming my shoulder against it. The old woman was looking over her shoulder, and her face paled further. "Don't stop! They're coming!" she urged. I hit the door again, harder this time, and it finally creaked open, exposing a dark staircase that seemed to spiral downward. "We have to go!" I yelled, ushering her through. The air around us felt colder as we descended. I was grateful for the cover, but the darkness swallowed us as soon as we stepped inside. I fumbled for the light switch on the wall, but my fingers found nothing but cold concrete. "Can you see?" I asked, glancing at the old woman. She squinted into the abyss. No, but listen," she whispered. "We have to be quiet. They can sense fear." That sent a chill down my spine. I didn't want to think about what it meant for them to sense fear. I pulled her closer, my heart still racing. The world outside felt miles away, and I realized we might be trapped without a solid plan. We made our way down, inching forward cautiously. My breath echoed off the walls, mingling with the old woman's soft whimpers. After what felt like an eternity, I caught sight of a faint light below. "Look," I pointed, "maybe that's an exit." She nodded, but her expression grew worried again. "What if it's a trap?" Before I could answer, I heard footsteps above us now, heavy, deliberate. I flinched and pulled the woman tighter against the wall, pressing back into the shadows. Would they come searching down here? Stairs go down. They may have gone down, I heard one nurse say, the voice sending a jolt of fear through me. Then everything grew silent. I strained to listen, heart thumping loudly in my ears. "Is it safe?" she whispered. "What do we do?" I peered down the stairs, but the light didn't seem welcoming anymore. "I don't know," I admitted. That's when I heard it, a low growl resonating from the shadows beneath us. I swallowed hard, a cold sweat breaking out on my forehead. We weren't alone. "Run!" I shouted, turning and pulling the old woman behind me. But as I did, I noticed something glinting on the floor, a small key left abandoned, worthless and ominous in the dark. I had to decide, should I take it? Would it help us, or would it just reel us further into the trap? I made a split-second decision. I couldn't leave the key behind. Against my better judgment, I reached out and snatched it from the ground as I dragged the old woman farther down the stairs. My instincts screamed at me to keep moving, but I couldn't shake the feeling that this small object could be crucial. "Come on," I yelled, the low growl growing louder, echoing in the confined space. The last thing I wanted to turn around and face whatever awaited us. But the fear fueled my legs as we raced into the flickering glow. We burst through another door at the bottom and stumbled into a dimly lit hallway. This time, the air was different, thicker, almost suffocating. "What is this place?" I murmured, scanning the area. The walls were smeared with strange marks, and the smell of dampness mixed with something foul grated against my senses. "Is this a basement?" she whispered, her voice shaking. I nodded. I wasn't sure what else to say. Suddenly, an unsettling sound rippled through the air, a series of taps, faint at first, but growing louder, as if something was patiently approaching. My heart raced anew. "We need to keep moving," I urged, forcing her to follow me deeper into the corridor. As we crept forward, I could hear my own breath as if it was amplified by the silence. Every corner I turned could lead to yet another danger. I stole a glance back at the key, now clutched tightly in my hand. Its cold metal felt heavy, and I couldn't shake the feeling that it held some significance. Then I stopped. The tapping had stopped too. My breath caught in my throat. "Did you hear that?" I asked. The old woman nodded, eyes wide with terror. I opened my mouth to suggest we move back, but before I could speak, a door to our left creaked open. A figure emerged from the shadows. A nurse, eyes devoid of life, and a chilling grin spread across her face. "You shouldn't be here," she said softly. "The others will find you." I couldn't think, only act. "Run!" I shouted again, and we dashed down the hallway. The sound of that raspy voice lingered in my mind like a festering wound. At the end of the hall, another door loomed. This one was covered in dust, and a heavy lock hung low on its frame. The sense of dread weighed me down as I approached. I glanced back. We were still alone for now. Should I try the key? "Is that a way out?" the old woman whispered, desperation creeping into her voice. "I think so," I said, my pulse quickening. I inserted the key into the lock, my hands trembling. Would it even fit? Then an unmistakable thud echoed from behind us. The growl had returned, this time closer, more vicious. My mind raced, so many questions filled my head, but there wasn't enough time. I felt like I had stepped into a nightmare, every sound pulling me further into chaos. With one swift turn of the key, the lock clicked. The door swung open, revealing an expansive room filled with shadows. I peered into the darkness just as something moved at the edge. "Let's go," I urged, pushing the old woman inside, but before I could follow, I glanced back one last time. The nurse was only steps away. Then, as if time slowed, I stepped through the door and slammed it shut behind me, cutting off the growl and the impending danger. But my relief was short-lived as I realized I was no longer alone. Inside the room, an indistinguishable figure stood in the corner, still and unmoving. The figure in the corner remained shrouded in shadows, the dim light barely revealing its shape. My heart raced as I took a cautious step toward it. The old woman stayed close behind me, her breath trembling in the silence. Who are you?" I stammered, voice barely above a whisper. No answer came, but the figure shifted slightly, a faint outline of what could have been a face. Just as I was about to take another step, I noticed the walls around us. They were covered in bizarre symbols and what looked like old photographs pinned haphazardly. Some images showed a group of nurses and patients, but others depicted grotesque scenes that chilled me to the bone. "Don't! We need to get out!" the old woman hissed, tugging at my arm. Reluctantly, I backed away from the figure and moved toward the door we had just come through. It stood ominous and unfriendly, but my instincts told me we couldn't stay here. The growl from before echoed briefly in my mind, a warning that our time was running out. As I turned to the door, the figure's voice suddenly broke the silence. "You can't leave without knowing." I froze. The voice was faint but undeniably human, laced with urgency. "What do you mean?" I asked, searching the shadows for a clearer view. "There are things here, secrets. You have the key," it said, gesturing toward my hand where I still clutched the object tightly. "You must uncover them if you wish to survive." My mind raced. The key felt more significant than ever. "Secrets? What secrets?" I pried, desperate for any information. "There are paths you do not see, doors that open beyond this one," it replied, leaning closer. I could almost see its features, a gaunt face framed with disheveled hair. "But beware, they may lead to worse horrors." The old woman tugged on my sleeve again, terror etched on her face. "We don't have time for this. Please, let's go." I wanted to run, wanted to escape at all costs, but there was something in the figure's eyes that held me captive. It felt like it was warning me, not threatening. I glanced at the door, then back at the figure, torn between fear and curiosity. Before I could respond, a loud pounding reverberated through the room. The door we had just entered was being struck forcefully from the outside. "Listen," the figure urged. "There is a room deeper into the building. You can unlock more than just this door, but you must hurry." As the door rattled, panic surged through my veins. "Where?" I shouted, desperation leaking out. "Through the back, down the hall to the right. You'll find another door, and it has a keyhole just for you," it said. "Let's go," the old woman cried, fear straining her voice. I turned, adrenaline taking over. I had to trust this strange figure, even if it filled me with dread. I rushed toward the back of the room, hoping the figure's words weren't a trap. But just as I reached the wall, the door burst open, and the nurse from before stormed in, her grin wider than ever. "Found you," she said, her voice dripping with malice. In that moment, all hope faded, and the chase resumed. I had to get away, or risk losing everything. I bolted deeper into the room, heart pounding louder than ever. The old woman was right on my heels, fear propelling her forward. I barely caught a glimpse of the nurse as we dashed past. Her eyes gleamed with a dark excitement that sent chills up my spine. "Keep moving," I shouted, urging the woman forward. The hallway stretched before us, dimly lit and filled with shadows that seemed to crawl along the walls. I remembered the figure's words, "Down the hall to the right." I had to trust it. We veered to the right, and just as I saw a door at the end, I heard footsteps echoing behind us. It was impossible to tell how close the nurse was, but I could feel the dread closing in like a noose. My fingers fumbled against the key in my pocket as we raced toward the door. "Is this it? Is this the one?" The old woman's voice trembled, and I could tell she was losing faith. "I don't know, but we have to try." I reached the door, my breath coming in quick bursts. It appeared old and heavy, a thick wood that felt ancient under my palm. I glanced back. The hallway was empty for now, but the sound of the nurse's laughter echoed, growing louder. I had to act fast. The key felt heavy and warm against my palm as I inserted it into the keyhole. Come on, I urged, twisting it with all my strength. The lock clicked, but I hesitated. A sudden thought struck me. What if this door led us into even greater danger? Do it, the old woman urged, her eyes wide with panic. With a deep breath, I pushed the door open. It creaked loudly, but I didn't look back. I shoved the old woman in first and quickly followed, slamming the door shut behind us. We were in a small room, cluttered with dusty old furniture and boxes stacked haphazardly everywhere. "What now?" she gasped, her face pale. I scanned the area, looking for any signs of safety or clues. A single bulb flickered above, casting long, eerie shadows across the walls. I noticed another door on the far side, further into the room. "There's another door," I pointed. "Maybe we can find a way out." As we crossed the room, the air felt thick with tension. Every box seemed like a hiding place for secrets. Suddenly, from somewhere behind us, I heard the unmistakable sound of the door rattling. The nurse was right outside. "Let me in, sweethearts," her voice crooned, the playful tone twisting into something sinister. "I can help you." I pressed my back against the second door, desperation clawing at my mind. "We need to hurry." I grabbed the knob and tried to turn it. It was stuck. "It won't budge," I cried. Just as I threw my shoulder against it, the rattling stopped. I glanced at the old woman, who looked just as confused and terrified. That was when I saw it. A small window in the far corner of the room, just big enough for someone to squeeze through. My heart raced again, hope igniting within me. "We can escape through that window," I shouted, pointing. But before we could move, the door creaked open slowly, and the nurse peeked in, her smile wide and predatory. "Where do you think you're going?" she whispered, and my stomach dropped. We were trapped, with nowhere else to run. The darkness began to close in again, but I knew I had to make a choice. I was terrified, but I couldn't give up. There had to be a way to uncover the secrets and escape this nightmare. The nurse slipped through the door with an eerie grace, her smile twisting my stomach into knots. "Isn't this cozy?" she said, her eyes roving over the cluttered room. I felt panic rising, clawing at my throat. "Back away!" I shouted, trying to sound braver than I felt. The old woman beside me trembled. My heart raced as I scanned the room again. The window was still there, gleaming like a promise of freedom, but the nurse stood between us and any hope of escape. "Oh, sweethearts," the nurse purred, "you really don't want to make this difficult." I felt that familiar chill creep back as she approached. The shadows danced around her, distorting her figure into something nightmarish. My instinct screamed at me to bolt, but the old woman was already frozen with fear. "Let us go!" I cried, inching back toward the window. The nurse laughed softly, each note slithering into my mind. "Where would be the fun in that?" She leaned closer, her eyes sparkling with malevolent delight. "You think you can just run away?" In a desperate act, I swept a box off the nearest stack, the contents spilling onto the floor. Old files, forgotten memories, and discarded personal items landed with a loud thud, capturing the nurse's attention for a moment. I turned to the old woman. "We have to go now!" Together we dashed toward the window. My heart raced as I grabbed the frame, but it was more stubborn than I anticipated. The nurse turned back, her expression darkening.
You can't escape. Help me, I yelled, my fingers fumbling against the frame. The old woman rushed to my side, her hands trembling as she tried to pry it open. It's stuck! Push harder! I could feel the urgent weight of the nurse's presence closing in, that sinister energy
filling the air. Just as I began to lose hope, the window creaked. I took a deep breath and shoved against it with all I had. With one more heave, it suddenly gave way, swinging open. Cool air rushed in, a welcome relief against my skin. "Yes!" I shouted. "Go! Go!" the old woman urged, her voice sharp with urgency. With no time to waste, I turned to climb through, but as I looked back, the nurse lunged forward, her hand catching my shirt just as I began to slip out. Her grip felt like ice on my skin, and I froze. "Don't you dare leave me," she hissed, venom dripping from her words. I twisted in panic, trying to escape her hold. It was then I noticed something on the floor amidst the scattered contents of the box, a glint of metal. A small, rusted key. I grabbed it without thinking, as if it would come in handy. I swung it instinctively at her hand, hoping against hope to break free. She recoiled, eyes wide with rage. "You little fool!" In that moment of distraction, I seized my chance. I slipped through the window with a rush of adrenaline, landing hard on the damp earth outside. The old woman followed quickly, her face a mix of relief and dread. However, we weren't out of danger yet. The ground beneath us trembled, and as I looked back, I realized the nurse was climbing through the window behind us with terrifying speed. "Run!" I shouted, grabbing the old woman's hand. We sprinted away from the building, fear driving us forward. But the key felt heavy in my pocket, a mystery I didn't yet understand. As we reached the edge of the hospital grounds, a strange sound echoed through the trees, prompting us to jet back behind a bush. There we hid, hearts pounding, barely daring to breathe. "What do we do now?" the old woman whispered, her eyes darting around. I looked at the key. I don't know, but somehow it all connects, and I need to find out what it unlocks. The moon hung high above the hospital, casting an eerie glow on the darkened ground where we hid, breathing heavily. I could hear the nurse's voice faintly trailing off in the distance, her furious calls echoing through the silent night. "You can't escape!" Her laughter sent chills racing down my spine. I felt the weight of the old woman's fear beside me. "What are we going to do?" she asked, voice trembling. I didn't have an answer, but I could feel the key pressing against my thigh, a lingering question yet to be answered. "We can't stay here," I finally said, glancing around the shadows that felt alive, hungry even. "We need to keep moving." With a nod, we crawled out from behind the bush and made our way towards the edge of the property, avoiding any lingering seers who might have been watching from the gloomy windows. Each rustle in the leaves, every snap of a twig made me flinch. Fear clung to me like a ghost. The hospital loomed behind us, its dark windows resembling lingering eyes that could draw us back in. "Where do we go?" the old woman whispered again as we slipped through the gates. "It's still out there." I hesitated. The main streets were too bright. We'd be exposed. But where could we hide? The thought of returning to the hospital was unbearable, yet I could feel the pull of secrets still undiscovered just beyond our reach. "Maybe there's somewhere near the hospital," I offered. "A shed, a visitor's area, anywhere we can catch our breath." My mind raced, remembering the old courtyard we passed earlier, a remnant of what this place once was. It was our best shot. We moved quickly, careful not to make too much noise, taking the side paths toward the courtyard. The night air began to chill, and as we approached the abandoned area, I shivered. The courtyard was covered in weeds, cracks snaking up through worn stone. It felt like a forgotten place, lost in time. "Is this safe?" the old woman whispered, glancing around. "What if she finds us?" "I don't know," I admitted, "but we can't go back." I reached for my pocket where the key rested, my only bargaining chip in this twisted game. "It's just a key," the old woman said incredulously. "What does it unlock?" "I'm not sure," I confessed, "but I think it's important. I think I'm supposed to find out." Just then, something caught my eye, a faint glimmer of light peeking through crumbling bricks by an old storage shed at the far end of the courtyard. My heart thrummed in my chest. "Let's check that out," I said, starting toward it. "Wait," the old woman pulled me back. "What if that's another trap?" "There's no other option," I insisted, pushing forward. "We need to find out what's going on here. We can't ignore the signs." The shed door creaked ominously as I slowly pulled it open, the hinges protesting against the weight of the night. Inside, long-forgotten tools and equipment lay scattered among dust and cobwebs. The light flickered again, and as I stepped deeper into the shadows, I saw a small platform near the back, barely visible under all the debris. "Over there," I said, pointing. My heart raced as I approached. The structure looked vaguely familiar, as if I had seen it before, but I couldn't place when or where. What if this led to the deeper secrets the figure had spoken of? I crouched, clearing away the layers of dust. As I reached the platform, I noticed a small indentation, a keyhole. Without thinking, I took out the key and held it in my shaking hand. A gulp of dread filled my throat. My palms were clammy as memories of the chaotic night flooded back. What if this was where it led us deeper into danger? "Are you sure about this?" old woman said, stepping closer. "No, but I need to be," I replied, my voice holding a tremor. I glanced at her. "You don't have to stay, if you want to escape." "I'm not leaving you," she interrupted, her determination solid. "Let's see what happens." Taking a deep breath, I pressed the key into the hole. It slid in smoothly, a satisfying click resonating through the shed as it turned. A door, hidden behind the moving piles of old equipment, creaked open, revealing an even darker corridor beyond. There was something mesmerizing about the void, a beckoning that felt both reassuring yet terrifying. I turned back to the woman, who seemed to feel it too, the choice before us paired with an inexplicable pull. "Our choice is made," she said finally, stepping forward alongside me. "Let's find out what this all means, together." We stepped into the darkness, and as the door closed behind us, I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever lay ahead was a choice that could uncover the truth or seal our fates. But in that moment, everything felt heavier. The ambiguity of it all blurred the line between the supernatural and the natural. The key had led me this far. Now I needed to trust my instincts, no matter where they would take us next. Would we find answers, or would we unearth horrors beyond our comprehension? I held the key tightly, not only to this darkened door, but also to the silence that haunted the halls of that hospital. Whatever awaited us next lingered just out of sight, and I could only hope we were ready to face it.